The night my world cracked open didn't start with thunder or screaming. It started with the soft hum of the refrigerator in my quiet kitchen, a sound I'd heard 1,000,000 times but suddenly felt louder than my heartbeat, almost like the universe was trying to pull me towards some truth I wasn't ready to see. I remember standing barefoot on the cold tiles, my fingers wrapped around a chipped coffee mug, staring at the steam rising like smoke from something burning inside me. My husband, Mark, was late again, so late the clock felt like it was mocking me with every ticking second, and I told myself the same lie I'd repeated for 2 years straight. He must be working, he must be tired, he must still care. But the truth was already sitting heavy in the room with me, curling around my throat like a slow, cold hand. I didn't know how to name it yet, but I felt it in the way silence weighed on the walls, in the way my own reflection in the dark window looked like a ghost of the woman I used to be. When headlights finally swept across the living room curtains, I felt my stomach tighten, not with relief, but with dread, like the moment just before a glass hits the floor. Mark walked in smelling like someone else's perfume, not even trying to hide it anymore, as if he wanted me to notice, wanted me to break, wanted something between us to snap just so he could blame me for it. He didn't kiss my forehead like he used to. He didn't even look at me. He brushed past me with that careless shift of his shoulder, the one he did when he was carrying guilt, but pretending he wasn't. I watched him drop his keys, watched him kick off his shoes, watched him exist in the same space as me while feeling miles away. I wanted to ask him who she was this time, what her name was, what part of him she owned that I didn't anymore, but the words stuck in my throat like sharp stones. He walked into the bathroom and I heard the shower turn on, the water hitting tiles like rapid-fire confession, and something inside me twisted as I imagined him washing off the night he spent without me. I stood outside the bathroom door listening, thinking about all the years I stitched our life together with forgiveness he never earned. When he finally stepped out, wrapping a towel around his waist, he looked at me like I was asking for too much just by standing there breathing. And then he said the words that sliced through me cleanly, like a knife gliding through soft fruit. We need to talk. Not angrily, not softly, just flat, detached, the way a doctor talks when delivering results he already knows will ruin your life. He sat on the edge of the bed, his shoulders hunched forward, his jaw tight, and I felt my chest tighten as if someone was pushing down on it with both hands. I sat across from him, knees touching the cold wooden floor, my palms sweating, my heartbeat pounding so loudly I was sure he could hear it. "I'm not happy," he said, and there was no tremor in his voice, no crack, no regret. It was like he was reading from a script he had rehearsed with someone else, someone who wasn't me. "I haven't been happy for a long time." The words dropped between us like stones in deep water. I stared at him, trying to recognize the man I married, the man who once held my hand like it was something precious. But this man looked different, colder, smaller, like he had been slowly hollowing himself out without me noticing. "I met someone," he added, and even though I had been expecting it, the moment the truth slipped out of his mouth, something inside me caved in so quietly I almost didn't hear it. I felt the room tilt, felt my breath catch on something sharp, and for a moment everything blurred. He kept talking, explaining, justifying, rewriting our years together like a bad story he wanted to close. He said he needed space. He said he needed clarity. He said he needed things I apparently never gave him. And while he spoke, every memory flashed through my mind. Our first date, our cheap little apartment, the nights we stayed up talking until sunrise, the promises whispered under blankets. All of it felt like it had been set on fire. When he finally stopped talking, the room felt painfully quiet, except for the violent pounding of my own heartbeat. I wanted to scream, cry, collapse, beg, but instead I sat there, cold and hollow, feeling the truth settle inside me like an anchor pulling me down. He stood up, grabbed a duffel bag from the closet, and started throwing clothes in it. He had already planned this. He was already leaving. He paused at the doorway, avoiding my eyes, and muttered, "I'll be gone for a while." And then the door closed behind him. That sound, soft, quiet, final, felt like the end of something I didn't know how to live without. I didn't move for a long time. I just sat there, staring at the empty space where he stood, feeling pieces of myself scatter like broken glass. And in that moment, in that heavy silence that wrapped around me like a shroud, I realized something terrifying. I had no idea who I was without him. And now I was going to have to find out. The days after Mark left did not crash over me like a storm. They came in slow, suffocating waves that soaked into everything, turning my life into this dull, waterlogged version of itself, where even breathing felt like lifting something heavy. I woke up the next morning to sunlight spilling across the empty side of the bed, and for a second, just one fragile second, I forgot he was gone. I reached out instinctively, fingers searching for his warmth, and when they met nothing but cold sheets, the realization slammed back into me so hard I had to sit up just to catch my breath. The house felt wrong, like someone had taken our life and quietly rearranged it while I slept. His toothbrush was gone. His boots, the ones always by the door, missing. The framed photo from our first trip together, the one he swore he loved, was turned face down on the dresser, as if even our past couldn't look at me anymore. I moved through the morning on autopilot, coffee, shower, get dressed for work, each motion feeling like it belonged to someone else, some version of me that still believed in forever. At the office, people talked around me, their voices muffled like I was underwater. My co-worker Jenna asked if I was okay, her eyes lingering a little too long on my face, maybe catching the redness around my eyes or the way my hands wouldn't stay still. I lied. I said I was tired. I said everything was fine. I didn't tell her that my husband had packed his happiness into a duffel bag and walked out the door like I was an old coat he no longer wanted to wear. At lunch, I sat alone in my car, hands gripping the steering wheel, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. I studied the woman looking back at me like she was a stranger I was being forced to share a body with. There were faint lines at the corners of my eyes I hadn't noticed before, smudged mascara from the night before, a rawness in my expression that made me look older, like grief came with its own aging process. I thought about calling him just to hear his voice, just to ask him why I wasn't enough, but I stopped myself. He had already answered that in his own way. When I finally drove home that evening, the sky was heavy and grey, the kind of sky that made streetlights flicker on early. The house looked dark from the outside, like it was holding its breath. I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and the quiet hit me harder than anything he had said. No TV humming in the background, no half-finished projects scattered on the coffee table, no Mark, just me and the echo of a life that didn't fit anymore. I dropped my purse and sank onto the couch, my body folding in on itself as if it was trying to make me smaller, easier to ignore. The clock on the wall ticked too loudly, each second reminding me that time was still moving forward, whether I could keep up or not. I don't know how long I sat there before I noticed the envelope on the coffee table. It hadn't been there the night before. My name was written on the front in Mark's handwriting, letters tight and slanted, like he had been in a hurry even while writing my name. My hands trembled as I picked it up. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No apology, no confession, just a printed copy of a bank statement and a brief note scrawled at the bottom. "You'll need to take care of this." My eyes moved down the page and my stomach dropped. Credit cards maxed, overdrawn accounts, payments I didn't recognize to places I'd never heard of, thousands of dollars gone. My name on almost everything. It felt like another betrayal layered on top of the first, a quiet, calculated one that went deeper than words. While I was busy holding our marriage together with late-night talks and second chances, he'd been unravelling our future behind my back. I grabbed my laptop, my fingers flying over the keyboard as I logged into our accounts. The numbers didn't lie. I saw transfers, cash withdrawals, hotel charges in parts of town we never went to. He hadn't just left me. He had drained me, financially, Emotionally, completely. My chest tightened, my breathing shallow, and suddenly the room felt too small. I stood up pacing, my mind racing ahead to rent, bills, the life I still had to live now that he had burned through the foundation of it. I heard my phone buzz on the table, a text from an unknown number. For a moment, hope flared stupidly in my chest, like maybe it was him, maybe he regretted it, maybe he wanted to explain. I opened the message. It was one sentence that made my skin go cold. He promised he'd leave you once he got the money. There was no name, no context, no follow-up, just that one line staring back at me like a verdict. My first instinct was denial. This has to be some sick joke, a mistake, a wrong number. But as I stood there, phone clutched in my hand, surrounded by the evidence of empty accounts and hidden hotel stays, that denial melted into something darker. The room seemed to tilt, shadows stretching across the walls in strange ways as the full weight of it pressed down on me. This wasn't just a man falling out of love. This was something deliberate, planned, almost strategic, like I was part of a deal I didn't know I'd signed. My heart pounded as a single terrifying question formed in my mind, one that would not let go. How long had my life been a lie? And who else knew the truth? That night, sleep didn't come for me. It hovered somewhere far above, out of reach, like a light behind a locked door, and I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while questions twisted through my mind like barbed wire. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that message again. He promised he'd leave you once he got the money. The words had carved themselves into me, deep and raw, echoing in places I didn't know could hurt. I finally sat up, unable to take the suffocating stillness of the room anymore, and walked to the kitchen, turning on the small lamp by the sink. Its weak glow spilled across the counter, landing on the letter he had left, the bank statement, the proof of how thoroughly he had carved his way through my trust. I stood there gripping the edge of the counter until my knuckles went white, wondering how long he had been planning this. And then something inside me shifted. Not anger, not yet, but a cold clarity that began to settle in my bones. If someone had bothered to text me, then someone knew something. Someone had been close enough to see parts of Mark's life I never saw. I scrolled through my phone, staring at the number again, noticing it wasn't from our area code. I typed back with shaking fingers, "Who is this?" The message showed as delivered, but no response came. I waited. Minutes passed. Nothing. Whoever they had said what they wanted to say and vanished, leaving me with a truth I wasn't prepared for, but also couldn't ignore. I set the phone down and paced the kitchen, each step slow and heavy, as memories began to rearrange themselves with new meaning. Late nights he claimed he was working. Trips he said were required. Money he said we needed for emergencies. All of it suddenly felt like puzzle pieces that had been forced together, edges bent, corners broken. I went to the hallway closet, pulling out the old shoebox where I kept important papers, birth certificates, our marriage license, insurance information. I sat cross-legged on the floor, spreading everything around me like some desperate archaeologist digging through the ruins of a life I'd once believed in. What I found made my breath falter. His pay stubs were lower than what he told me he earned. His tax forms showed side jobs he never mentioned. There were statements from a credit card in his name only, one I didn't even know existed, charges for restaurants, gas stations, and places I had never once been. A sick, sinking feeling began to grow in my stomach as I realized just how little of him I'd ever truly been allowed to see. The man I thought I loved had been living a second life right under my nose. But the question that gnawed at me, sharp and relentless, was why? Why bleed me dry emotionally and financially? Why build a relationship only to gut it? Why leave so cleanly, so confidently, unless he knew something I didn't? I gathered the papers back into the box and shoved it aside, leaning back against the wall as exhaustion pulled at every limb. My head ached, my chest felt bruised, and yet somewhere beneath the misery was a flicker of something new, an instinct, a warning, a pull toward truth no matter how ugly it would be. The next morning I drove to Mark's workplace, even though every step of my body resisted it. The building looked the same, tall and glassy, reflecting the grey sky above, but inside everything felt wrong. His co-worker, Tim, spotted me in the lobby, his expression shifting the second he saw me, surprise, discomfort, then something almost like pity. "Hey," he said, adjusting his tie. "Didn't know you'd be here." "Is Mark in?" I asked, trying to steady my voice. Tim hesitated. A long, heavy pause. "He quit," he finally said. "A few days ago." The ground under me tilted. "Quit? Without telling me?" Tim's eyes darted away. "Look, I don't know what's going on between you two, but he seemed different lately, distracted, secretive. I figured you knew." I didn't know anything. That was the worst part. I thanked him and walked out, the cold air hitting my face like a slap as I stepped outside. The world looked the same, but everything inside me had changed shape. If he quit, if he closed accounts, if he drained money, he wasn't just running from a marriage, he was running from something bigger, or running towards something. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel, breathing in slowly, forcing my lungs to expand, even though they felt like they were wrapped in iron. My phone buzzed in the passenger seat. Unknown number again. My pulse spiked as I picked it up. Another message. "Stop looking for him." My fingers went numb. I typed, "Who is this? What do you want?" But like before, no answer came. A cold chill crawled up my spine, settling at the base of my neck. This wasn't random. This wasn't accidental. Someone knew exactly what I was doing, exactly where my fear lay, and they were feeding it on purpose. For the first time since Mark walked out the door, the fear inside me sharpened into something else, determination edged with dread. I wasn't just dealing with betrayal, I was dealing with secrets buried deeper than I ever imagined, and someone out there wanted those secrets to stay buried, even if it meant burying me with them. I drove home with my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles looked bleached, and every red light felt like a punishment for not seeing the truth sooner, for letting love blind me to the danger that had been building like a quiet storm behind my back. The second message, "Stop looking for him," kept replaying in my head, each word echoing with a threat that felt more real the longer I thought about it. By the time I pulled into my driveway, my heartbeat was no longer racing from fear, but from something colder, something steadier, like resolve settling into my bloodstream. The house looked the same on the outside, but as soon as I walked inside, I sensed it immediately. Something was off. The air felt heavier, as if the walls were holding their breath again. I locked the door behind me and moved cautiously through each room, trying to convince myself that nothing was different, that I was just paranoid after days of emotional freefall. But when I stepped into the living room, I froze. A drawer in my desk was open. I never left drawers open. I approached slowly, heart pounding, and found the contents disturbed. Papers shifted, folders pulled out, envelopes misplaced, like someone had rummaged through them and then tried to put everything back just close enough to normal so I wouldn't notice. Only they didn't know me well enough. They didn't know how carefully I tried to keep my life in order, how desperately I clung to small routines after Mark broke the bigger ones. A chill crawled down my arms as I knelt beside the drawer, sifting through the papers with trembling hands. Nothing seemed missing at first, but then I saw it. The shoebox from last night was slightly out of place, the lid not perfectly aligned. I lifted it, every muscle in my body tensing, and opened it. Papers were rearranged, some were bent, and one of Mark's pay stubs, was gone. Someone had taken it. Someone had been inside my home. I stumbled back, grabbing my phone with shaking fingers, trying to dial 911, but halfway through typing the number I stopped. What would I even say? That someone stole a single paper? That someone might have broken in without leaving a mark? That anonymous messages were warning me to stop digging into my own husband's disappearance? It sounded insane even to me. I dropped onto the couch, running my hands through my hair, forcing myself to breathe slowly, evenly. Whoever took that pay stub wanted something specific, something connected to him, something I hadn't figured out yet. I tried to remember everything I had seen in the box, every document, every line of every form, hoping something would spark a memory. But my thoughts were a tangled mess, colliding with fear, exhaustion, and distrust. I stood and walked to the kitchen, needing water, needing anything to ground me. That's when the doorbell rang. A sharp, unexpected sound that sliced through the house so violently I nearly dropped the glass in my hand. My breath caught. I moved toward the door on instinct, but stopped short of opening it. Instead, I peered through the peephole. No one was there. My pulse spiked. Slowly, carefully, I unlocked the door and cracked it open just enough to look outside. Still nothing. The street was empty, quiet, a soft wind pushing dried leaves across the pavement. I stepped onto the porch, scanned the lawn, the driveway, the sidewalk, forcing my eyes to take in every detail. And then I saw it, an envelope lying on the welcome mat. My stomach twisted as I bent to pick it up. No name, no return address. Inside was a single photo. Mark, standing in a parking lot I didn't recognize, talking to a man I'd never seen before. The man's face was partially turned, but even the small part I could see looked rough, jaw shadowed with stubble, a neck tattoo creeping above his collar, a posture that radiated something dangerous. Mark looked nervous in the photo, hands in his pockets, shoulders tight. He wasn't being affectionate, he wasn't cheating, he was scared. And the man standing with him seemed like someone no reasonable person would want to be near. The timestamp on the corner of the photo was from 3 weeks ago, 3 weeks before he walked out, 3 weeks before our money disappeared, 3 weeks before everything collapsed. My throat tightened as I stared at the photo, the edges cutting lightly into my fingertips. What was Mark involved in? Who was that man? And why was someone sending me proof? I went back inside, shut the door, locked it twice, and took the photo to the table, laying it flat like evidence in some case I never asked to be part of. The fear I felt earlier had changed shape. It wasn't the fear of being abandoned anymore. It was the fear of realizing I had been living next to a stranger for years, someone capable of lying, hiding, disappearing, and dragging me into whatever mess he had been trying to outrun. I tried calling Mark again, even though I knew he wouldn't. Answer, straight to voicemail. His voice sounded different now, cold, distant, like a recorded ghost. I hung up and immediately dialed the unknown number that had texted me. It rang once, twice, then a click. Silence. Someone was on the other end, listening, breathing. "Hello?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. More silence. Then the line went dead. My hands shook as I lowered the phone, a cold sweat forming across my back. Someone was watching everything I did. Someone was keeping track of every step I took. And as I stood in my dimly lit kitchen, holding a photo that felt like a warning more than an explanation, I understood something with terrifying clarity. Whatever Mark had gotten involved in, it hadn't ended when he walked out. It had only just begun. The night after the photo arrived, I sat awake on the living room floor with every light in the house turned on, because the darkness didn't feel like something outside of me anymore. It felt like something waiting, breathing, pulsing just past the windows, and every shadow seemed ready to reach in and take the last pieces of my sanity. I kept staring at the image of Mark standing beside that tattooed man, the way Mark's shoulders curled inward like he was trying to make himself smaller, less noticeable, like a child caught in something he couldn't escape. It didn't matter how long I stared at it. The truth never softened. He wasn't cheating. He wasn't bored. He wasn't unhappy because of me. He was involved in something dangerous, something serious enough that strangers were watching my home, warning me, breaking into my life like it belonged to them. I pressed my palms over my eyes and tried to pull in a breath, but the air felt thick, sticking to my throat, and tears I hadn't planned on shedding slid down my cheeks before I could stop them. I hated how much I still loved him, how my heart still ached for his safety even after he'd shattered me. Loving someone shouldn't feel like bleeding out, but it did, and I couldn't deny it. When the clock hit 2:17 a.m., a noise outside made me freeze. Not footsteps, not a voice, a car engine, slow, crawling. I moved toward the window on instinct, my feet silent on the floor, and parted the blinds just enough to see the street. A dark SUV rolled past the house with its headlights off, moving like it didn't want to be seen. My breath hitched. For a moment, it stopped in front of my driveway, idling. Then it drove away without speeding, almost calmly, like it already knew everything it needed to know. My hands shook as I let the blinds fall back into place. Someone was watching me, not from a distance, not coincidentally, on purpose, with intent. Every instinct I had begged me to run, but where could I even go? My entire life, my job, my friends, my routine was built around a man who no longer existed in any recognizable form. I couldn't outrun something I didn't understand. I sat on the couch and grabbed the key photo again, flipping it over to see if anything was written on the back. For a second I thought it was blank. Then I noticed faint marks in the lower corner, like indentations left by a pen pressing hard through another sheet of paper. Whoever handled this photo had used it as a surface to write something. The realization made my pulse spike. I ran to the kitchen drawer and grabbed a pencil, shading lightly over the indentations, like how detectives do in movies. Slowly, lines and letters formed. Numbers, a date, a location. Tomorrow, 4 p.m. Stop looking or else. The words materialized like a threat breathed straight against my neck. A chill ran through me so violently that I had to grip the edge of the table to steady myself. They weren't just warning me, they were setting a deadline, a countdown, and whatever or else meant was something I didn't want to understand firsthand. I couldn't sit still. I paced the room, each step echoing off the walls in a house that felt smaller by the second. My thoughts twisted. Was Mark in danger? Was he part of something illegal? Was he alive? Or worse, was he the reason these people were coming for me? I replayed every moment from the past year, searching for signs, clues, hints that something was off. The late nights, the constant anxiety in his eyes, the way he flinched when his phone buzzed, the whispered calls he took outside, the panic the night he thought he saw someone following us on the highway, the time he told me to always lock the doors, even when I was home, the time he said if anything ever happened, I should go to my sister's house and not look back. At the time, I thought he was stressed, paranoid, maybe even depressed. I didn't know he was trying to protect me from a world he couldn't escape. I sank onto the couch again, pulling my knees to my chest, and for the first time since he left, I whispered out loud into the empty room, "Mark, what did you do?" The sound of my own voice startled me. I sounded small, trembling, like a child asking a question the world was too cruel to answer. A tap behind me made my breath freeze, not on the door, on the window, a soft, deliberate tap that didn't match the wind or branches or anything natural. I turned slowly, every muscle tight, staring at the glass. Another tap. My heartbeat climbed into my throat. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, and then nothing. Silence. I forced myself to crawl forward inch by inch until I reached the window. I lifted the edge of the curtain with 2 fingers. No one was there. No car. No shadow. Just an empty street under a flickering street lamp. Then, as I lowered the curtain, I saw it. Something tucked into the bottom corner of the window frame, wedged so precisely I knew it had been placed there intentionally. A folded slip of paper. I opened the window with trembling hands, grabbed the paper, and unfolded it. 3 words, no explanation, no signature. "We have him." My breath stuttered in my chest as I read it again and again, each repetition hitting me harder, carving deeper, pulling the floor out from under my feet. Mark wasn't running, he wasn't hiding, he wasn't choosing a new life, he was taken. And now, I was part of whatever game they were playing, and the clock was running out. I don't remember standing up, or grabbing my coat, or locking the door behind me. All I remember is the sound of my heartbeat hammering so violently that it drowned out every other noise as I drove toward the location I'd found hidden in the indentations on the back of the photo. The city looked different that day, as if every building was leaning toward me, watching, waiting, and the sky hung low and heavy like a warning, pressing down on everything. I checked my rearview mirror 100 times, convinced someone was following me, but the only thing behind me was the quiet stretch of road and the unsettling feeling that I was heading straight into something I couldn't escape. When I reached the address, a run-down industrial area on the edge of town, a place with boarded-up warehouses and broken streetlights, I felt fear crawl into my spine and tighten its grip. The air smelled like rust, oil, and something sour, something old, something wrong. I parked a block away, heart thudding painfully, and walked slowly toward the warehouse number marked in the pencil shading, Building 12. Its windows were blacked out, the metal siding rusted, the door slightly ajar like a mouth waiting to swallow someone whole. My hands were trembling as I reached for the door, pushing it open just enough to slip inside. The interior was dark except for a faint glow coming from the far corner, flickering like a dying bulb. The sound of distant dripping echoed through the space, each drop landing with a hollow metallic ring that made my chest tighten. My footsteps echoed softly as I moved deeper inside, and every instinct begged me to run, to back out, to call for help. But the note, "We have him," echoed louder in my mind than fear ever could. I followed the dim light until I reached an office built into the corner of the warehouse, its door cracked open. I pushed it slowly, breath caught in my throat, and stepped inside. The room was empty, except for a chair in the centre, and a single envelope placed neatly on it. My body locked up for a moment, as if touching the envelope would set off something irreversible, but I forced myself forward, picked it up, and opened it. Inside was another photo, Mark again, but this time he was sitting on the same chair, his hands tied behind him, his face bruised, dried blood at the corner of his mouth. The timestamp was yesterday. My knees nearly gave out. My fingers tightened around the photo, crumpling the edges, while my mind swirled with panic and something darker. Rage, betrayal, desperation, tangled into one unbearable knot. Beneath the photo was a small card with a handwritten message. "You have won. Chance. Bring what he owes. Tomorrow, 6 p.m. Come alone." I stood there staring at the words until the letters blurred and the room felt like it was tilting around me. What he owed? Money? Information? A debt older than our marriage? I had no answers, no resources, no leverage, just fear and the hollow remains of a love that had turned into a trap. I folded the photo and the card with trembling hands, slipped them into my coat pocket, and stumbled out of the office. The warehouse suddenly felt too silent, too still, and I had the sickening feeling I wasn't as alone as I thought. When a floorboard creaked behind me, I spun around, my breath catching in a sharp gasp. But no one was there. Only shadows. Only the echo of my racing heart. I forced myself to leave, walking quickly, not running, because running felt like an invitation for something to chase me. Outside, the air was colder, sharper, biting against my skin as I hurried to my car. I locked the doors the second I got inside, gripping the steering wheel so hard my hands ached. My mind was a tornado, images of Mark beaten and tied, of the men in the photo, of the envelope on my window, of the SUV watching the house. I drove home in a fog, headlights blurring through tears I didn't even realise were falling. Inside the safety of my living room, I dropped onto the couch, buried my face in my hands, and let the truth crash into me all at once. Mark hadn't just lied about work. He hadn't just drained our accounts. He hadn't just walked away. He had been running from people capable of kidnapping him, capable of breaking into my home, capable of stalking me, threatening me, watching me like prey. And now they wanted something from me, something he owed, and I had no idea what it was. My hands shook as I pulled out the photo again, staring at his bruised face until my vision blurred. I hated him for leaving me. I hated him for the lies. I hated him for dragging me into this darkness. But beneath all that hatred was something I couldn't deny. I couldn't let him die. No matter how much he had broken me, I couldn't be the one who walked away. The clock on the wall ticked loudly in the quiet room, each second a reminder that tomorrow at 6 p.m. everything would change. Either I would save him, or I would lose everything. As I sat there in the dim light, clutching the photo with shaking hands, a cold realization settled deep into my bones. Whatever debt he owed, whatever mess he created, whatever danger he ran from, I was going to have to face it alone. And the people who had him, people watching my every move, weren't going to give me a second chance.